Good evening. It's 7 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Abby, would you take the roll, please?
Commissioner Larson,
Present.
Commissioner Steeler,
Present.
Commissioner Young,
Here.
Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Brink,
Here.
Commissioner Kubal,
Here.
Chair Gerard.
Here. We're asking if you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair is looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented or with changes.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, sir.
I have a motion and a second. It's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimous. Item 5, the consent agenda considerations. We have one item on there to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from April 26, 2023. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a
moved.
motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Our first regular agenda item is item 6. It's a public hearing. It's a preliminary plat plan unit development, zoning map amendment, comprehensive plan amendment for Shadow Creek Estates, 6150 202nd Street North. I believe, Abby, you're presenting?
I am, Chair, if you can give me a second just to figure out how to present this to you all. Let's see if this comes up. On your screens, did it change to the site location? Great. Naturally, my first flying solo night, I can't even present my materials. Give me just a second here. See if that one comes up. Take a minute. There we go. Thanks for bearing with me. Todd Christensen of Elmcrest LLC owns the subject property that we're talking about this evening. He's proposing to develop it as Shadow Creek Estates, a mixed-use development. That mixed-use development would preserve the existing farm site and stable operations, while also platting in, I think the staff report said 48, but it's 46 single-family attached units to the north. As a reminder to the commission, you have seen this development quite a few times, the first time being November of 21. The plan has changed slightly in that the western portion of the development, also owned by Elmcrest LLC, is no longer a part of the PUD. We are really just looking at that eastern parcel, and again, just for reference, I'll kind of go back up here, just that eastern parcel. When we're looking at planned unit developments, comprehensive plan amendments, subdivisions, we look to see if the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan guides this property for high density residential, and that's a residential density of 15 to 20 units per acre. The last time this development came before you, the developer had proposed in that kind of northern section, single family residential. And some of the preliminary comments from the commission was to increase the density in this area to be more consistent with the comprehensive plan. So that is why the development plan has changed from single family now to that attached townhome or attached single family design. That being said, even though the plan guides the property for high density residential at that 15 to 20 units per acre, even in this development scenario where we are really trying to obtain some right of way through here, put in access to our single family, get our ponding, preserve our wetlands, leaving not a lot of excess development room, we're only sitting at about 6 to 7 units per acre, hence the comprehensive plan amendment considerations. Now, that being said, the developer does have a request before the city, which you will see soon, to split this western parcel to allow for apartments. Apartments are allowed in that zoning district. Those apartments would have a higher density. And we're looking at the possibility of shifting some of that density a little bit through there. Those are things that would forthcome before this commission. The Park Trail, the former Park Trail Lakes Commission did review this in October of 2022. The property is not guided for any parkland dedication, but does have access to Southview Park, just to the north of this parcel. Therefore, the Park Commission did recommend the city accept fee in lieu of land dedication, which could help improve Southview Park. Additionally, the developer is proposing at the city's request a trail that will extend along the property boundary and connect to that adjacent western parcel for connectivity from County Road 50 or 202nd Street is the local road name. So the park and trail plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So getting back to just kind of that underlying zoning, the hobby farm, as we are kind of called it in the staff report, is what we call a legal non-conforming use. The city zoning code allows for legal non-conforming uses to be maintained. They can be maintained into perpetuity. The owner is at least proposing at this time to maintain that legal non-conforming use. The land area for the legal non-conforming use, though it does appear to be reduced by the platting out of the single-family attached home design, there is a wetland that crosses through here where the operations of the stable and the farm site haven't necessarily been using that. So staff would say that the legal non-conforming area of the parcel isn't being reduced further than what has been historically used. The single family attached up in that northern corner in 4 to 6 unit buildings is an area that it would need to be rezoned. It is currently zoned multiple family. The multiple family doesn't allow for that single family attached home design. So the applicant does need to, as part of this, rezone the property. This would be a consideration for preliminary rezoning to one of the MXR districts, that the mixed residential districts that allow for that single family attached, either that MXR 1 or 2. It is most consistent with the new MXR 1 zoning district standards. When we look at the PUD analysis, there are areas which the applicant is asking for some deviation from the city's code. A couple of those areas are front yard setbacks. So currently the lot area is being shown as 20 feet to the back of the curb. However, there is a 5 foot, I could probably zoom in a little bit and actually zoom out. There is a 5 foot, from where those dwelling units will actually be constructed would be 25 feet. And in these areas where the sidewalk exists would also be 25 feet. So we've got sufficient room there to actually have that setback in place. Additionally, as I talked about the grazable acreage, our code does indicate that you need to have 2 grazable acres for every 1 animal unit. That's an area that is necessitated that, or has kind of triggers that legal non-conforming status, and whether or not the commission agrees with that. The street, even though the street has been labeled as a private street, the city staff does want to see that as a public street. However, we would want to see, as part of this PUD, that future maintenance, particularly the snow removal of that street, be the responsibility of the homeowners association, given its narrow setback or its narrow design. They are proposing a 28-foot face-to-face street where 32 would be required in our code. Again, because of the homeowners association's willingness to maintain the snow removal through this area, we do think that that might be a reasonable consideration. And then lastly, a fence is proposed along the northern property boundary. The northern fences in this district are permitted to be 6 feet. Any fence in excess of 6 feet would require a conditional use permit. Because it's a PUD, that would be one of the deviations called out in the final plan. We talk about the development. Woodland preservation was a little tricky for staff to determine. We think that there's probably additional analysis that's needed on woodland preservation. The landscaping plan that was submitted does fall a little short of the underlying zoning district's requirements. So while the developer is proposing an excess of overstory trees, there are no understory trees. The development actually would require 285 understory trees. Staff does think that that is a lot, but right now we have none being proposed. So an updated landscape plan requiring some understory vegetation, it would be required. The engineering department has reviewed this. They have advised the project does need to coordinate with Rice Creek Watershed District. There was some questions about street parking and whether or not guest parking would be included. Staff has advised that given the townhomes design with the parking or with the driveways so close together, we would want to see some sort of incorporation of guest parking onto the site. That is going to affect the overall drainage plan, potentially wetland impacts. But we need the developer to explore that and see how they can get some guest parking in on this site. Trail easements would need to be obtained not only across the parcel, the block 1 there for the 46 unit, the HOA development, but also across the property for the stable sites. Lastly, the engineering department had inquiries about what would be located in between the driveways because there is only a 4-foot separation. And if those are going to be landscaped or with grass, that they would need to be irrigated as well. So we don't have that information right now. This, as part of this consideration, tonight is a public hearing. In advance of the public hearing, a neighborhood meeting was held a week or so ago. I don't remember the date, and hopefully it was in my staff report. There was a neighborhood, there were neighbors in attendance. A handful of neighbors did come out. There was an express support, no opposition, but that being said, nothing has been submitted in writing before this meeting. So staff's recommendation tonight would be to hold the public hearing and provide comment to the developer. However, staff is recommending the commission table consideration of this item until we work through a few of the other details that we need to see in the preliminary plan here before we would recommend approval of a preliminary plat. That being said, I did receive information from the developer today just regarding some of the things that are identified in the plan, specifically things like trail easements, the width, some of the density calculations that we're looking for to be able to do that further analysis. But I do think that we are working well with the developer to get those things back before you in a timely fashion. Developer Todd Christensen is here tonight if you have questions for him. Otherwise, do you have questions for me?
Questions for staff? Geneva?
Okay, so we don't really know whether it's going to be a public or a private street just yet.
We have discussed this with the applicant. They are favorable to it being a public street. It's just was initially labeled at submission of a private road. We just didn't ask for that to be changed quite yet because we knew that there might be some other changes coming forth.
Okay, and then if it's a public street, then I would imagine the parking rules would be no parking overnight. And will there be any with this street, especially at winter time, if there's going to be parking allowed? I just think a private, if they're going to take on this private, cleaning up the snow, that might really cause even more problems with parking, especially if people are parking in the street at the very time that the snowplow arrives. With all the driveways really close together, there's just not going to be a whole lot of place to put that stuff. And this year was exceptionally challenging for even people who had a lot of space. So I guess is this area going to be no parking on the street at all?
Staff does believe that we would need to sign at least one side of the street as no parking just because of the roadway width. Generally speaking, a lot of townhomes, what they do is not stockpile their snow, but actually physically remove it from the site. That is something that the city could even require as part of the PUD, given the limited roadway width through here. I do think that we can also probably require no parking at certain times. Those sorts of things really just get hard to enforce in the long term for the resources the city has.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm thinking. If it was started it as no parking at all, then it's almost easier to enforce because nothing changed. But anyway, we'll see how that all pans out. Then I'm wondering, I know that, I think it was this site that had an apartment proposed on one of the sections earlier. Now, I don't know if that's going to ever happen or not. But does the builder ever notify potential residents of what may come down the pike? Because when I'm hearing people say they've bought into this place and they like the tranquility and all of those kinds of things, had they have known that there's a potential plan for an apartment building, they might not buy there. So what is the obligations for the builder to notify potential homeowners of what plans may or may not be kind of they're thinking about?
Sure, they are not obligated, and private landowners aren't in any way obligated to share their development scenarios. It's part of this process that informs the public. As part of this PUD analysis, there was the neighborhood meeting and will be this hearing this evening and the subsequent neighborhood meetings and hearings we've had. I would have to double check, just maybe as we take public comment, as part of the future development of the western parcel, of what kind of hearing notices and neighborhood meeting requirements there are for that as well.
That's all I have.
Susan?
Abby, our 60-day deadline that you've got on here is 3 days from now. So it's either we're happy joy with this or too bad, so sad.
We intend to, staff has the right to extend that without the city council or planning commission's consideration. We intended to extend that consideration.
Total acreage of that Shadow Lake, that's a half section, isn't it? 180 acres?
I cannot answer that at the moment, but I can, I don't think it's 180 acres though, no.
Where I'm going with this is,
We're at 28 acres for the entire site, for the entire eastern half.
Yeah.
So that is for consideration tonight.
okay. Okay, what I'm getting at is, you said that the entire property is future high density. So you're looking at the entire, however many acres it is, being 16 dwellings per acre?
So what we're doing, because
I'm trying to get.
Yep. So what we're doing is, because the stable site is being preserved, which meets a goal of our comp plan, is to preserve our rural and agricultural values and farm sites and businesses and operations. We are excluding that development area out of the 28 acres, as well as any wetlands, roadways, those things we're permitted to take out. And then we're just looking at the net developable area acreage of this site, and that's where we're getting to the 6 to 7 units per acre. When we're looking at the future density of the farm site, we will look at that at the next generation of what that site is. So the theory being, this generation, this plan is we're preserving this farm site. If the plan changes in next year, 5 years, 10 years, we'll have to reevaluate that based on the comp plan's guidance at that time.
I'm a little bit confused on the evaluation under table 1. It says that they're looking for 20 feet to the back of the curb is shown from the building pad area, but the actual setback from the building to the back of the curb will be 25 feet. So is the building pad, what's the other 5 feet?
Sure. So it does vary, just so you know. Here we're showing on the south side where we don't have a sidewalk, 20 feet from the building pad area. but then the actual buildable area is being denoted in, with this dotted line. And that dotted line shows that extra 5 feet. So in this location, north of the sidewalk, we would have 25 feet from the edge of the sidewalk to the actual building itself, whereas 20 feet would be is the building, like the parcel boundary. So from the parcel boundary to the edge of the sidewalk's 20 feet, but from the sidewalk to the building would be 25.
And what's the spacing between the 4-unit thing and then the 6-unit thing and then the next one over? How much spacing is that?
25 feet apiece on the north, and then down here we are on the south, we have up to 28 feet
Okay,
there.
I'm worried about firefighting in there. I have no idea where they're going to put snow here, especially with a 28-foot road. Those are not large driveways. You are going to have people parking in the street. I mean, humans are going to live there. They're going to do what they do. And at the price point that the developer said in our work here, I don't see an HOA being supported that would have the kind of dollars HOA fees to do removal, because that gets pretty expensive. And I also can't see the city ending up with a one-sided parking ban in here to preserve fire and emergency protection in a regular winter, much less last this winter. So I'm really concerned about the width of the street. Very, very concerned about the width of the street, and how we're going to preserve emergency services and snow. That really bothers me. I'm also concerned about, we're packing a lot of dwelling units here, and you're right, I don't see any way of having vegetation supported on a regular basis in the 4-foot areas, and there really isn't much on backyards either. So when they submit landscape plans, does the city approve Arizona style with the gravel just to avoid erosion? That's something that the city would consider?
I don't believe that there's anything that would require that to be green vegetation in that area between the 2 driveways.
What is our landscape requirements?
I would have to, I don't know them off the top of my head, but we can definitely look into how those areas conform or not.
Then on the partner agency comments, a picky one, the trail easement should be provided 10 feet on either side of trial, center line for any trials
I
located.
did notice that, thank you.
I have some concerns about this one, but it's a preliminary plat, and I'm guessing that there will be changes coming through.
Other comments?
Well, just speaking from experience, if this is going to be a proposed private street, it's not going to be enforceable by the city doing anything, snow removal, parking enforcement, any of that stuff. It's going to be HOA controlled. As far as the driveways in between, if they're going to do any type of landscaping, you're going to have salt from cars. You plant anything, it's going to die. Even if it's a hardy plant like a dogwood or something like that, it's going to die from the salt of the cars and stuff. So that's kind of a moot point, I guess.
Other comments?
One more. Does the city get a copy of what the proposed governing documents are going to be, so we have an idea of what commitments they're making to the residents and what they propose those costs are going to be? So that, I mean, do we ever get that?
We generally will get HOA documents, but we're reviewing them for things like discrimination. We're not looking at them for content, nor do we have the ability to govern what's in those covenants. It would be up to the city to look at conditions of approval within our planning, PUD approval, and then subsequent development agreements to ensure that if there was requirements that we wanted to see.
Okay, so if we're worried about snow removal and those kinds of things, and it can get really costly, if that isn't built into those governing documents, then we already don't have what we might need to ensure that the residents know going in, this is going to be the HOA's responsibility, and they haven't set aside enough money to get that done. Whatever it is, landscaping, snow removal, any of that stuff.
Right, that would be built into the city's approval documents, and
would
then
be.
if those things weren't upheld, the HOA would be held in violation of the approvals.
But if we don't know if they're in there to start with,
I don't know necessarily that they need to be in their covenants. It would be our approval to the developer, and it would bind against the land in perpetuity.
Abby, what's the reason for this 28-foot wide street? It looks like we can do 32.
Right, it's 30, right, 30 back to back, 28. Right, so it's a 2-foot difference. I do have it on the screen right there. We do show 30 feet back to back. I guess I didn't note when I had said 28, I did, it's face to face is the driving lane. Part of it is to be able to get the density in here. This commission directed the developer to try to increase density. And this is a way that that is being proposed. The widening of the road possibly could occur. However, it's going to be encroaching further closer. I guess encroaching might not be the best word. It's going to get closer to those adjacent properties to the north.
2 feet.
Yes.
To me, it doesn't make any sense to allow anything but a standard street. We got enough issues with this development, with snow and everything else. And I assume you'll be working with them on guest parking of some type?
We will be working as part of this before we, ideally we'd like to have something still at the time of preliminary plan and plat that shows where we can accommodate guest parking on site.
Then you see this being either MX or 2 or 3?
I think it was 1 or 2. 3 doesn't allow for the attached single family, if I remember right. But I think it's the MXR 1 or 2.
MXR1 requires a split between single family and
Oh, that is right.
it'll be a 2. So it'll be a spot zone in a sense.
It would end up becoming an isolated zoning district, and it would end up probably guiding that future development to the south a little bit differently too.
Thank you. Susan?
Now I'm really confused. On your table 1, you've got your street width as our required standard is 32 feet face to face, and the requested deviation by the developer is 28 feet face to face. So
That is correct. It's 34 back to back is our standard, 32 face to face.
okay. I'm still looking at a face-to-face width in that street.
Of 28 feet. That is correct.
Other questions for staff? Hearing none, I know the developer's here. Do you wish to add anything to the conversation? We ask you to come up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Todd Christensen, 6051 202nd. No, I think Abby did a pretty good job presenting. We've been working with the staff pretty closely on some issues, and we agreed to table tonight, but we wanted to hold the public hearing and just hear comments from you people and, make some changes in the plans, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
If you hold on a second, do you have questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. What we ask, if you wish to speak to this application, please come up to the lectern, state your name and address for the record. Please paper name and address for the record. Spend a couple minutes giving us your thoughts on this application. Once everyone has been heard, we will close the public hearing and we'll bring it back for further discussion and a motion from the commission. So with that, we will open the public hearing at 7:30 PM. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Abby, do we have anyone online or any emails to be read in?
We do not.
Thank you.
Name's Darla Taylor, and I'm at 20540 Georgia Avenue North. And our property abuts the backside of this development. We've owned our property nearly 30 years, purchased solely for the reason of the current aesthetic. So this density comes as a shock and complete change to the entire development of the area. And I guess my main question, beside why does it have to be this dense, does this mean going forward that in Forest Lake, any developer comes in, be pushed to have this maximum density, where it doesn't even kind of make sense that, from my yard looking out, I can't even imagine this many units. And as you've said, the squashiness of the road, where will the snow go? I have daughters who have rented townhomes, and notoriously they are slow to plow. So we will have all these people with a very, very difficult way of accessing their homes or leaving their homes. But mainly, why does it need to be this dense when first we were proposed single-family homes behind us? And it seems more workable, it seems more doable, it keeps with the aesthetic of the area. That's my concern. And it just changes the entire feel of all the developments around us is kind of my thought.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address this application?
I'm sorry. I just think it's really important for everybody to understand that this is zone 15 to 20 units an acre. We first came in at single family, now we're at townhouses. The option to fit the zoning and the comprehensive plan is an apartment. So in my focus on planning, it's a transition from, it's not all up here, but when you're coming off the highway, we have maybe an apartments on the highway, we move into a little less dense, and then as we move north, we move into single family. So I think it's the right transition, and we've been working towards that end with the staff, but I do think it's important that we recognize that this is a 15 to 20 unit an acre property. And the only way to get that is an apartment, 3 stories, 4 stories high. So that's all I got to say.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this application? Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public hearing at 7:34 PM. Commissioners, comments, discussion?
Abby, I think there's not a really good understanding of the MXR and the increased density rules that the city put together in the last year or so. That's something that you want to give the nickel tour of, or should we refer our
I can-
commenter to someplace else in city files?
This property has nothing necessarily to do with the MXR1 zoning district. The city's development pattern is guided by our comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan has a future land use map. That future land use map guides every single property within the city towards some future development. This property is guided for high-density residential, which is 15 to 20 units per acre. The overall guiding density, when you add up all the land area for the city and you take all the low residential and all the higher density residential, you smash it all together, we as a suburban emerging community in the metropolitan region are required to have an average density in the community. And forgive me, I think it's, we'll just say 6. I think it's 6 to 8. 3 to 6, I don't exactly remember. In order for us to achieve that density, that's how we kind of guide our land. Why it is this property backed up to single-family residential is one we guided for high density. I can't tell you. I wasn't here at that time. But I think I would agree with the landowner that, you know, initially this came in with single-family for that consistency with the neighborhood directly to the north. And it just had a really low density. It had about 3 units per acre. So really far off from the 15 to 20. Getting at 6 to 7, maybe it'll come in a little bit higher if we're kind of factoring in potentially apartment buildings on the west. That helps kind of try to balance out that density through the entire city. This housing style, even though it might not be as desirable next to single family, does provide that transition, I think, from single family to the extremely high density that is being called for on the rest of the parcel. I don't know if that's the nickel tour you're looking for, but long story short, we're part of the metropolitan region. We are an urban community and we have to develop in an urban fashion as a whole. Our future land use map in the comprehensive plan guides us in the ways for us to achieve those overall densities within the community.
Thank you for that explanation.
And we've got another fairly large apartment building on our agenda tonight.
Next up. Other comments? Questions? Hearing none, the chair is looking for a motion. I will remind everyone in the commission that the staff and the applicant have asked us to table this.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to table.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. It's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 6B, Concept Plan Unit Development Amendment, Zoning Ordinance Map Amendment, Site Plan Review for Headwaters Villages, PID 29-032-21-12-0017. Abby, I assume you're presenting since you're the only one on that side of the room.
And I feel like I'm doing an okay job, so I'm good. Maybe it's too early in the night to.
Hey, you got the tech down, girl.
I got it. I figured it out. Len Pratt of Fenway Investments Inc. owns the property that's highlighted on there. It's an unaddressed parcel located in the middle of the Headwaters Village development. He is proposing or asking for city feedback on a proposal for an 82-unit apartment building. And tonight, your role is to just review the concept plan and provide feedback to the developer. So when we're looking at concept plans, what we're looking to see is if it's consistent with the comp plan, the zoning code, if there's any sort of glaring violations of our regulations. The comp plan guides this property for mixed use, and that mixed use is identified as retail, office, service, and multifamily residential at a density of 10 to 15 units per acre, so slightly less than our high-density residential developments. Overall, allowing for multifamily here is consistent with the comprehensive plan, but they are proposing a greater density than what would be that 10 to 15 units per acre. If I remember, I don't have my staff report right in front of me. I think it was about a little over 20 units per acre that's being proposed. Our code is really specific when it comes to density, in that density increases may be permissible by the city when there's no adverse impact to the neighborhood or the public interests, public utilities, public resources. And there's additional private amenities. That is a may. We're not obligated in any way to increase the density for the development. However, staff, as a general planning principle, does believe that, and it's, I'm new here, I could still say that, I feel like. Generally, if there is multifamily being permitted and the site can accommodate additional density, consideration for additional density, as long as it fits within the character of the neighborhood and meets all the zoning code and they have parking and they've got amenities, is an okay thing. And that really does help us in the future balance out the density in our community. Again, where we can allow for the increases in a higher density can help offset elsewhere in the community to allow for more rural residential development and more large lot development. Helps us balance out those urban amenities and the urban development and our kind of more traditional large lot development. So regarding zoning code consistency, this parcel is a part of the 2006 Headwaters PUD. I'm going to pull up that PUD. This is the master PUD that encompasses quite a bit of the community in our kind of southwest corner, right on the verge between what is the really urban area and what is a really rural area. This is where we do have the Fenway Athletic Complex. We've had some new residential development. But this village core is the area that was really designed for commercial uses. That's located here. It's just showing that village core. We had really anticipated in this location things like grocery, retail, the services that these residential neighborhoods would need. Since the time of the PUD being approved, we've approved the YMCA, the library, many multifamily units just to the north of this village core. But the village core area where this outlot is located really was guided for commercial. This is where it gets really tricky. The underlying zoning for the property of neighborhood commercial and the overlay zoning, that PUD from 2006, neither of them are consistent with our existing comprehensive plan. Our existing comprehensive plan says we'll allow for mixed use, not this needs to stay commercial in perpetuity. When we're looking at circumstances like this, case law really does say your comprehensive plan guides your future development, and therefore, even if the zoning isn't consistent, you said you would guide it this way, this is what it should be developed as. Given that, even though we really saw this kind of nice little village core with walkable amenities and retail services, there's really no conflict in, that's not even a great word, there's the multifamily unit, the multifamily land use really does prevail here, that we can't necessarily hold the underlying or the overlay PUD as the standard because of we changed our mind when we adopted the comp plan. So that being said, staff did do an analysis of the land use in the village core area. That village core area really being the YMCA, the county service centers, the existing, there is an apartment building, there is Sweet Living, a senior building, there's a bank, there's a vet, there's a daycare. When you add up all those land uses, over 70% of them are non-residential. Sweet Living is that kind of one that can kind of go both ways. Sometimes some communities consider it residential. It's a senior care memory living facility. If you consider that non-residential, it's greater than 80% of this area has been developed as non-residential. So staff has no formal findings for you. Really, the intent of tonight is to provide the development team with just some preliminary comments, provide comment on the site layout, design, private amenities offered, and or if there's impacts to public services and efficiencies, and then maybe some comments on whether or not this warrants a proposed density increase. I know that Len Pratt is not here, but I think maybe there's a representative from the development team that is here if you want to discuss this.
Comments for staff? Questions?
Could you pull up on here, I know you showed the lot where this is in the overall map, and
It is an
what
old
else-
aerial.
Yeah, okay, there's the aerial. So The other land areas there that
This
are
is-
undeveloped right now around it, is this consistent or have we already put it? I know there was like a daycare
Some
that
things
was
have been put in, yeah, it is an old aerial. So this is the YMCA. This is the county service center, the DMV, the library. This is the transit center. We can still call it a transit center, even though it's not being used that way.
Parking lot.
The vet clinic, Bell
Jefferson
Bank,
Lines goes there.
people park there, so,
It's a parking lot.
It is a stop between the cities and Duluth for the Jefferson line.
oh, well, there we go. Thank you for letting me know that. So the vet clinic, Bell Bank, we have our new Bridge Academy and Early Childhood Center, Sweet Living, which is that senior living memory care facility, and then this is an apartment building in this location. So other than potentially Sweet Living, could be considered residential, and the apartment building, the rest of it has grown up with non-residential uses.
So this is the last commercial site.
This is the last commercial site in the
Development.
Headwaters development, in the Headwaters Village development.
Susan?
I do still have my big original Headwaters plan. I keep telling myself I'm gonna recycle it, but I never do. The whole concept here was that we were waiting for residential properties to fill in, what the history is. Headwaters was put together, it was approved, and housing recession hit, and everything stopped. And so then the goal was, okay, we're gonna wait until we get some more housing so that we can have a grocery store on this end of town, so that we can have the coffee shops and the small retail to serve the higher densities that will come in. And so now we have on the north side of the library, we've got, 2 apartment buildings there, third one there, 3 apartment buildings over there. We've got the 2 apartment buildings now in this area. We're looking at serious density and serious apartment buildings across down the Shadow Creek area. There are no retail amenities. And what we've said is that we want these apartment buildings with not very much parking, because we want people to be able to live there and do their stuff there. And quite frankly, you can't get to a grocery or a clinic or a Stop and Rob or anything else unless you got a car if you're living in this area. And that was why when we did the whole master plan and Mr. Pratt brought that forward, we made sure that there was space there for the services that folks that we hoped would live there would have. I grant that a lot of the promises of that development have not been kept. Headwaters Parkway is a great example. When you take a look at the trees and the way that that was supposed to be landscaped and maintained through the project, that hasn't happened. But I'm really concerned about more and more very high density development that we're encouraging folks to have no cars or 1 car for a multi-bedroom apartment facility. And really, we're not then providing the access to the services that we're saying you reduce parking spaces and increase density, so that you'll have local things and you don't have to drive. And you don't need 2 or 3 cars per family. So I'm concerned. I was also around when we did the comp plan, and we asked, is this area, that planned development of the Headwaters, will that be retained? And that is still the underlying, that is still the guiding, and we were told yes.
Which is true. The underlying zoning is neighborhood commercial. The future land use, the guiding is mixed use. And that's where that's where that change happened. And so it's
We're told
true.
That was not going to happen.
Right, it's true. It still allows for the retail, the service, the other things that we really would like to see there. It's just where we designated a lot of things mixed use, we're really seeing that market pushed towards the residential. And unfortunately, the way that it got into the comp plan and into our zoning code is our mixed use districts require a minimum of 50% residential. And so I can't attest to how all of that happened. I just know what we have, and I do think it is worth us revisiting soon.
Don?
You know, when I look at these density requirements that were, you know, pushed to meet for the metropolitan area, and to be able to put a high density here in this location, to me, seems like a good spot to put it. And if that helps us in the big picture and long run by having a higher density in this area, this seems like, to me, like a logical place to have a high density in the area. Now, I know you don't have a lot of retail in this area, but the way things go these days, go to the mall, there's not a lot of people at the mall anymore. There's a lot of Amazon trucks running around. So I think things are different and have changed. Yeah, I'd love to see a grocery or something on this edge of town, but I don't know that that's a big enough lot to put something like that in there. So I think that's a good location to put a high density with close proximity to the YMCA and the library. And if we ever get transit, I think it's a good location. And in what I'm looking at in that plan, and my understanding, there's not only all the parking that we're seeing there, but there's underground parking underneath all the units, right?
That is correct. They're not asking for any waiver in the per unit parking requirements. I would have to do an assessment on the guest parking. We just aren't to that level of detail right now, but yes, this would be proposed to have underground parking.
Other questions of staff?
I really don't think that staff or developers are going to be saying, okay, we've got a lot of high density here, so now we can chill out. I think that it's still going to be required, but as long as we are okay with going ahead and saying, yes, we're putting a lot of high density here, but we're not going to have provision for services or the things that all those residents are going to need. Now that's kind of what I think of as planning folks' responsibility is if we're going to put a lot of folks in a place, then we need to make sure that they have access to the services that. Yeah.
They need walking access to the services?
That's pretty much what our comp plan says, is that in the areas of high density, we are going to have walkable communities.
Abby, where is the 123
Right here.
acres relative to this?
Yep, the access point, though we don't actually have, true roads going into Headwaters 123, there could be a potential access point coming in just off of Fitzgerald Trail North. I will note, so Headwater, I don't show the entire Headwaters 123 development that the city owns here, but this is the 123 acres. The original PUD did call for that to be more residential. And since that time, the city has guided this for business park. And that being said, just this week, Monday night, the EDA did look at concept platting of this site. So the city has been guiding the property for the securing of a potential data center. The EDA did look at this site this week as a potential for smaller plat, not maybe, an acre or 2 or 5 or 10, but to look at how we might be able to incorporate some other uses in there that would not only provide high-paying jobs, but also maybe provide some of those amenities that we're seeking for the residents in this neighborhood.
So it'd be
everything-
possible to put in potentially here some commercial.
There might be, yep, there might be.
amenities for the residents in the area.
That is true. We have talked with our broker about opening up that market to allow for other services in that area. That, yeah. Yes.
Can you review the plan, slide 2 there? It's, I couldn't really read this.
It was a very poor quality concept plan.
So can you kind of walk us through, and to Don's point, parking and the underground parking, how many stories we're looking like? I couldn't get that off of this.
Sure. I do believe it's a 3-story building with 82 units. They would have underground parking of 82 units, and then it looks like 91 surface stalls parking. So they would probably be short of their guest parking requirements. The rest of the information in there is just coverages with regard to sidewalks, impervious surface, that sort of thing. I will say some of the comments that aren't necessarily included right now, there's no allowance in here for stormwater management. That would need to be accounted for. So even though the developer is asking for 82 units, I think that that would probably be reduced in coming forward with an official submittal or official plan for site plan review, rezoning, those sorts of things, just because we're not meeting all the density or development requirements for this project.
Other comments?
We've still got folks parking on Fitzgerald Trail all day, every day. Want to add to that burden, but this is just a really preliminary, and we can talk about parking later.
It is very preliminary. I mean, in staff, the reason staff encouraged the developer to come forward now was the idea that this is being proposed as residential. We understood the intent of the Headwaters PUD, the village core, the neighborhood commercial zoning district. If there was extreme opposition to multifamily here, we believe the developer needed to know that before they put too much more effort into this plan.
I believe the developer or representative is here. We ask you to come up. You want to spend a couple minutes giving us your thoughts? We ask you to state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Chuck Youngquist. Len apologized he can't be here. He had previous commitment, so he asked me if I could come. What I just, you know, I'm Len's controller for his business, but just like to say that Abby did a wonderful job summarizing what the intentions are here. One thing I wanted to touch on is that it does fit the character of the neighborhood with the other apartment buildings and the density requirements. And with that, this property's been for sale for a long time, and there isn't any retail people wanting to put anything there. So we're not that far from 61, not that far from getting up to Cub Foods. So those are just a couple of comments I wanted to make. So, any questions?
And we have in the last 2 years had a very large number of new dwelling units in there. I grant that I'm old and out of shape, but I'm still not sure I would want to walk to either Cub Foods or Festival.
There's
from
other
here.
means of transportation too.
Yep. This is probably, if we're going to be pushing significant new apartment buildings, this is probably a place to put it. It's just, I am concerned as we're putting significant more density in the area, making sure that we realize that there are not services for those dwelling units.
What issues or what concerns does Len have regarding this development as he's looking for input from the Planning Commission on?
He just mentioned that what Abby summarized here in her write-up was his intentions, you know, that they, again, It fits the neighborhood. I don't think he has any other concerns. And yes, more work has to be done as far as drainage and all that stuff, but, you know, it's early.
Just out of curiosity, and like I say, I can't really tell a lot of stuff here. Is there a area for kids to play?
There is, excuse me, Chuck.
Yeah, no,
There is, and it is located to the backside of the building. There is a patio and a playground located adjacent to Headwaters Parkway.
Thank you. Questions of the developer? Comments for the developer? Thank you for your
Very
time.
good. Thank you.
Commissioners, this is a concept, so if we have concerns besides the density and actually going here, now's the time to voice them.
Chair, if I just might note, since I've come on, I don't know if all the commission is aware that half of my salary is funded by the EDA. Part of my role is to work more proactively on economic development efforts in the city. We just haven't had the resources necessary to do that. Included with myself and Assistant City Administrator Dan Undum, we are routinely involved where we can in putting Forest Lake out there in the development community. Pretty consistently, we're hearing that in this area of the city, there are not enough rooftops to support commercial development. It's also a complaint, not a complaint, but something we're hearing about redevelopment in the downtown area. And so these are things that we recognize that we need to stay on top of to look at how we can promote additional non-residential development, but also allow for additional residential development that might help trigger some of that rooftop count that those developers are looking for.
Further comments, commissioners?
Abby, for a future meeting,
Yes.
between our apartment buildings that we've put over by Village Green and along on the other side of the expressway, and what we've approved in these areas, I just would be interested at some future meeting to figure out how many dwelling units we're up to
Sure.
in multifamily properties.
Sure, I know right now at the top of my head, we have 49 existing. This doesn't include this development. This doesn't include the potential in the Shadow Creek's lot split that'll come before you later. We have 49 apartment buildings. That doesn't include all the townhome developments as well. And it's a little over 2,000 units thus far. I can get you more specific statistics though at a future meeting. I do also know I have talked with the EDA about looking at the Highway 61 corridor. A lot of the Highway 61 corridor is guided for either residential or mixed use, and what kind of analysis we can do before our next comp plan round. Because again, we're only 3 years into our comp plan. What we might be able to do between now and our next comp plan round to really look at, are we guiding our land uses most appropriately when we're really seeing a lot of that mixed use heading for multifamily residential? Now, that's not to say that multifamily residential is bad, right? It offsets that large lot rural character that we really want to preserve, especially east of 61. But how can we really encourage more non-residential development as well to help offset some of these developments? So that is something that is on my to-do list for sure. But I certainly will bring back some more statistics for you on multifamily housing.
Thank you.
Any last comments? Hearing none, we'll close item 6B. Move to item 6C. It's a continuation of resolution number 05-10-23-01 and resolution number 05-10-23-02. 9860 and 10066, 180th Street North, Northern Natural Gas Floodplain Conditional Use Permit. Gabby?
Thank you, Chair. So as the commission may remember, and if you don't, I understand we've got a lot going on, but you should remember at your last meeting, you held a public hearing and closed a public hearing for a conditional use permit for Northern Natural Gas. The use permit was for utilities in the floodplain via horizontal directional drilling that would occur under a water body located within the city's limits. And this is kind of going, this is the area that the conditional use permit really applies. As a reminder to the commission that natural gas line, which they'll drill underneath this water body, will connect to a valving station located at the intersection of July Avenue and 180th Street North. While the drilling in the floodplain and the utilities in the floodplain require a conditional use permit, the valving station does not. However, during our analysis, we did determine there is a 7-foot fence proposed, which would also require a conditional use permit. So direction was provided to the applicant and staff at the last meeting to explore additional screening options of the valve station that would be located near that intersection of July Avenue and 180th Street North. Since that time, it's been determined that the 7-foot fence, as it's proposed, wasn't designed to screen the valve setting. It's really designed just to help protect that area. The valve setting is 10 feet tall and it will not be completely screened by the fence. Additionally, we recommended slats to be installed on the 7-foot tall fence to reduce the visibility of the valve setting from public view. However, 7-foot tall fence with slats would be in violation of the city code because of the clear corner. The proximity of this improvement, especially that fencing area around the valve station, really starts to get to a point where it's hard to see around, could be hard to see around if we had those slats in the fencing. Additional landscaping around the valve setting would also could impede on that clear corner, the right of way. And then also it has been determined there is a multiple entrance fox den in the area that could possibly be affected. So given all this, the applicant has explored these options for additional screening, but as a requirement, or just as a reminder, the valve setting itself, even though we'd like to see that additionally screened, doesn't require city review and approval. We really don't have any authority to require additional screening of this improvement in the area. Therefore, staff would recommend the council move to approve. There's 2 resolutions in your packet tonight, one for the CUP for the pipeline in the overlay district, and then another one for that 7-foot tall fence in the agricultural district. I just want to note for the record that on the dais tonight before you was a letter that was submitted just before the meeting from concerned citizens within the neighborhood. It's up to you, I suppose, Commissioner or Chair, if you'd like me to read that into the record. But I do know that the applicant is here if you have any additional questions for him. Otherwise, does the commission have any questions for me?
Questions of staff? I think we'll take a minute to I can read it.
Abby, if
Yes.
we don't read it aloud, is it still a part of the record?
It is. It's submitted as part of it. It'll be held in this meeting's packet, and then we will put it in that case file record in perpetuity.
Abby, I realize that you got this today. Did our city attorney also receive a copy of this?
The city attorney has not received a copy. We have vetted this one out with our city attorney pretty specifically. We have very limited authority when it comes to the valve setting outside of the floodplain because our zoning code doesn't require that component to have any sort of use permitting or review. And when there is no use permitting or review, our ability to put conditions on it goes away. So staff is really looking at that fencing as an option for public safety. We appreciate the applicant's willingness to put that in. Again, that's also not a requirement. They could request just to, they could option just to remove that. So from a staff standpoint, this is a really hard one. This is a facility that's regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Local government has very limited control in these circumstances.
If we approve this and FERC has other determinations, whereas
Our use permit would still be valid. They would have to come back to us if there were changes in that floodplain or changes to that fenced-in area. If they moved the valve setting into the floodplain, then that would need to come back before you. If there were significant changes to the fencing that would be required, then that would have to come back before you. It does sound like the interested parties that are engaging with FERC or the neighborhood that is looking to challenge the request, if they found a suitable other location with Northern Natural Gas, that we could have very limited involvement in that. If they just moved it back, but it's on the subject property or something like that, we would say that it's probably still substantially in compliance with the original approval.
Other questions of staff?
I have one.
Do you?
If we don't approve the resolutions, can they still move forward with the properties because it's governed by someone else?
No, because our local zoning code does require a conditional use permit to put the utility in the floodplain. And that being said, they could move forward with with an underlying property owner and secure an alternative route, an alternative easements outside of the floodplain wouldn't require our approval, but I do believe that even 180th Street's in the floodplain, so it would probably need to still come back before us.
one last, we have a 60-day ruling on this, don't we?
We do. I do believe we've still got a couple more weeks. We are keeping an eye on that.
For folks in attendance, could you just explain what we mean by the 60-day rulings?
Sure. As per Minnesota state law, the city has 60 days to review a land use application. You want a fence, you want a directional bore in a floodplain. By state law, we have 60 days to review that application. And if we don't review it and take action within 60 days, it's automatically approved. We do have the right to extend that 160 days for another additional 60 days as per the state law. So we always keep an eye on our 60-day rule as to try to make sure that we that an application is inadvertently approved without our ability to take action on it.
Do we need the permission of the applicant to extend the additional 60 days?
We do not need, the city has the right to extend that if we wanted to.
Thank you.
We held a public hearing 2 weeks ago, so we are legally not required to host another public hearing, but we know the neighborhood is here. So we will invite comment. I need to tell you that the Planning Commission's role is very limited here. We are dealing with the boring underneath the water and the fence. Everything else of where the valve is going, everything else, that is out of the city's, I'm not going to say responsible, purview. Thank you. So if I invite comments, if you want to comment about drilling under the lake or the fence, that is what we can deal with here. I invite anyone who wishes to speak to those two issues, please come up, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Adam Jelfs, resident of 18150 July Ave North. I just really short comment that you can't control the valve location, but you can decide upon the drilling through the wetland. And it's been said that in and of itself can control whether that valve station goes there or not. So whether you guys say you can't, decide upon that valve location, you can via the underwater drilling. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Hello, I'm Emily Jels. I also live at the address of 18150 July Ave North. My concern with the drill going through the water is the potential aftermath and/or effects of a misdrill or a mishap. It has happened. You can Google it, stuff will pop up. I have lost a major food source. I lost a form of like work. For example, there was the Line 2 up north, also near a property that I have on tribal land. They took a lot of water. They tried to go around it. They tried to do whatever they could to do this Line 2. Wound up with a very dry season, lots of poor families, no gifts and no birthdays, no parties, no nice clean shoes for school. I don't know who utilizes this pond or lake or whatever, but just to go to show that I really wouldn't appreciate seeing history, continuously happen within, the problems of boring through or borrowing water.
Bruce Bain, 10151 180th Street. And the letter, I was merely the draftsperson. We had several meetings of different families all together. I tend to object to the statement that it's agricultural. These are all single-family residential homes. We are a very tight group of people in the neighborhood. I'm on the Yugo side, it's right on the other side of the road. The purpose of what we are attempting to do is in submitting to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to have become an intervention is to get the whole file. You haven't seen it. We get it. We can look at, was there a second site? How does it go? And perhaps there is another one. My background starting off was in geophysics. Then I went into sales. That was much more fun. So thank you for reading what we proposed. We're hoping what we want is not to block the whole entire idea that natural methane gas needs to flow down there. What we want to do is see what the choices were and what the choices are for this area, because we all feel it's very dangerous. Somebody said you can't put plants there. Sure, because they had to put a barrier to protect it from being hit by a car. So we want the opportunity. We are all your citizens. I'm on the Yugo side, but forgive that. And we want to have a hearing. When I say us speaking, several of us didn't even know about the valving station, know any of the project until April 6th. So if you look at what we were able to accomplish between April 6th and now, it's significant. I've had 3 conversations with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and I'm hopeful that they're going to respond, but they may respond and say, no. If they do, then I would have to submit this and say, well, it's not there. We need the time. And the decision in advance of the time seems to me that you have the remainder of 60 days plus the potential of another 60 days that I will use very resourcefully in the time in my communications with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Being retired, I have the time to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
My name is Paula Shamea. I live at 9860 180th Street North. I've lived there my whole entire life. That is my parents' property. None of these guys in my neighborhood had either bothered to come and talk to me or my parents about it. The valve station is going at the end of my property. We're all in agreement to it. We're the ones that own that property. We don't want the slatted fence. I plow that driveway. My dad is paralyzed from the middle of his chest down. I take care of that whole entire property for my father. I plow it. If you put a slatted fence around it, you're gonna block my vision of oncoming traffic going north and south of July. There's a stop sign there. 50% of the people run that stop sign. If you guys have been out there, you guys know it. You see it. Nobody pays attention. I do. I've called the cops numerous times. I'm in and out of that property. We're okay with the drilling of that lake. That lake is ours. They came to propose it. My dad addressed his concerns on that whole entire thing. They went with the DNR, the EPA, whoever they had to talk to about the Fox Den. They've made agreeances with our concerns because it's our property. We're all in agreement, we're okay with it. Neighbors want to complain, it's our property, not theirs. We've lived there my whole entire life. I'm 41 years old. My parents bought it, 75. So we're in agreement.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you like us to respond in this forum, or would you like to close it and allow us to respond to some of the comments?
This is not a public hearing, so feel free.
First, my name is Stephen Martinez. I'm with Northern Natural Gas, 1120 Center Point Drive, Suite 400 in Mendota Heights. I have with me Jake Fahrenkrug with Stantec, who is our consultant. We just want to make a few comments on some of the concerns that were made in regards to the boring for the lake. But first and foremost, I want to say that we have 11 landowners that are on this project in total. Starts out in the further down 180th to the east. All of those landowners have been in agreement for the project. We have acquired all of the necessary easements and workspace required for the project. Folks in the neighborhood are free to contact FERC and make those comments. We welcome those comments and we'll address those accordingly. For any concerns that they have, we are installing this location to extend essential services to the community, such as Forest Lake. And then there were some comments in regards to some impacts to the water. So I have Jake with me, who's going to make a few comments on the installation of that and the practices that will be used to ensure that's a safe process.
As Steven said, I'm Jake Fahrenkrug with Stantec. I'm at 2080 Woodbury, Wooddale Drive in Woodbury. The HDD in discussion currently will go underneath the floodplain between mile 0.35 and 1.0, sorry. Yeah, 0.4, I believe, mile post on that line. But anyways, it's an open water feature that is regulated by the DNR. We've been in correspondence with multiple agencies in the area, including FERC, Minnesota DNR, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Rice Creek Watershed District, yourselves, as well as various other entities. The drill itself is going to be 1,162 feet. At the deepest depth below the lake, it'll be 57 feet. During the drill itself, I don't know if you're familiar with the process, but before we can even plan on the drill itself, we did geotechnical borings to determine the depth, the arc length, depending on bore size, all of that, all of which was submitted to the FERC and was approved through the environmental impact statement that was finalized as of March 10th of this year. And then during drilling, Northern uses the safe drilling fluids that are agreed upon through Minnesota Chapter 4725, which is just the safe drilling fluids that are agreed upon by the state. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
You do an EIS or an EIA?
Yes.
There's already 2 lines going under that lake, correct?
That is accurate. Yep. Just to the south of the proposed line.
Other questions? Geneva?
I don't know exactly who this question goes to, but I hear residents asking for time to table this so they can do some research to work within the remainder of the 60 days and then whatever time it might take for the additional 60 days. And so I'm wondering, one, if that's possible, and two, what the negative impact would be to Northern Gas.
So we're currently waiting for FERC to approve the certificate. This is a proposed project that would go before the commission, we hope, next month. We'll know this week if it's going to actually be on the agenda for this month for the approval, and we would get the notice to proceed. All of our projects are always contingent upon FERC's review and approval of all of the impacts based on the comments that come in. It would not cause a delay, but we would ask that if there was a reason to deny the request, we may ask to remove the condition for the fence completely from consideration and ask you just to vote and approve for the conditional use permit underneath the lake, and then remove the fence proposal altogether, since that seems to be the most upsetting portion of the concerns related to the valve settings location.
Would you still want to put the guardrail up?
We would still need to install the guardrail to meet our standards. Yes, ma'am. We would like to keep the fence, though. We actually, as Abby noted, it's not required, but when we vetted this project, it is in a residential setting. And we wanted to ensure, because we didn't know the demographics of the area, if there's a lot of kids or anything like that, we wanted to ensure that we weren't putting something in a location that kids could climb on, ultimately get hurt, and create issues with, because large things they like to climb on. So my department, which is the right-of-way department, proposed our engineering department that we needed a fence. And so we advocated to place the fence for security. One, because it's a remote area in the evenings, there's not a lot of traffic out there. And two, to ensure that the children, if there are any, are not climbing on our infrastructure and potentially becoming harmed.
You're requesting, or the CUP is for a 7-foot fence, 6-foot fence you can just put up. How come the extra foot? I'm just curious.
It's a 6-foot security fence, so at the top there is the turned out barb 3-wire, and so that adds the additional foot.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That count on our, Abby? Make it a 7-foot fence?
That is what we've determined it to be, the 7-foot fence.
No, but the barbed wire makes it a 7-foot fence.
That is what we've, yes, that's why we've indicated that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we could modify and remove the barb setting if the commission would be more comfortable with that. It's in our standards that we do that. This location doesn't necessarily need a security fence because it is just a valve that will be locked. So if it's something that is of concern and that would remove it, we could definitely reduce it just to a standard topped fence, just 6 foot in height.
And then they wouldn't need a CUP then, correct?
That is correct. It would not need a CUP.
You did that.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Other questions?
I have a follow-up to her statement about the request. On the, our intervention in the document, which we will be serving upon them, and they will also get it from FERC, and believe me, give you a courtesy copy. One of the things that we want to see is, was there a secondary site in the original proposal? According to the FERC regulations, however, not entirely inclusive, they're supposed to, when they make a submission, have 2 locations. So we first challenged the idea, but that's the only place to put it. However, we want to make very clear that we were not told until April 6th, and apology to you, I've been to your house, I know where you live, but if we didn't know about this, there's a reason why. I have been busy studying and reading all about all the FERC rules. I didn't drive up to your house. I've contacted quite a few people, and I already knew that you received money from them in order to do that. So I just figured automatically that you're going to be pro in favor of it. So apologize for that. To your point, what I'm asking for is the time to represent this group and look at the project and then give you the full information, because as I put in there, it would be interesting to see it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the documents that they're requesting are public information, and so long as they don't contain sensitive information, they could make those requests directly to us. But I do believe that going through FERC is the proper channel so that they can get the information released that is public, and they do have the right to do that. To answer your question, again, it wouldn't necessarily cause delays, but we would ask for the approval so we didn't have to go through the other processes to move forward with the project.
Abby, Susan and I are a little, we have pretty good memories, but they're getting worse every day.
True that. True that.
So the reason that this even came out, they have to come here, was due to a CUP to do the horizontal boring, and that was late breaking news for the city that we had to do that, correct? We didn't realize that that had to be done, or?
I think we were pretty consistent with the applicant from the beginning that we would need a CUP for the directional boring in the floodplain. It's the fence around the valving station that's kind of triggering that late, like, yes, we need a use permit for this. If the fence went away, we wouldn't need or it went to 6 foot or, 5 foot with the security barbed wire, that wouldn't need a use permit. So the second resolution in your packet, you could deny or just not consider it tonight. But we always knew about the use permit for the utilities in the floodplain.
I was confused there. Thank you
That's
for
okay.
clarifying that.
It's a hard one to kind of know where our boundary, really is. Could I just, Chair, do you mind, could I ask just one question of the applicant?
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Stephen, do you, just in the documents submitted to FERC, and if it is true that there were, alternatives that may have been needed to be considered?
Yep. As part of our projects, we do have to do an alternative analysis. And
Can I just
alternative
ask really quick one question?
Yeah.
Would the alternative analysis still included the directional boring in the floodplain?
It would have.
Thank you.
So regardless.
Regardless of the future processes going forward, we would still need to be considering a use permit in the floodplain. Doesn't matter where that utility spits out and the valve station that we don't have control of, that we would have still needed to act on, we will still need to act on a use permit no matter what that future, it won't. Our action tonight isn't going to necessarily affect any future actions of the neighborhood and FERC, because our action tonight isn't related to the valve station, it's related to the boring in the floodplain, utility in the floodplain.
Did you want us to,
Can I make a request?
yes, sir.
Abby, can we withdraw the request for the 7-foot fence immediately and only request consideration to the floodplain boring? And Mr. Chair? And we would commit to install a 6-foot fence with,
As long as it's placed on the record. And then I think we would just want an additional condition in the resolution that alternative design submitted for staff's review and approval for conformance to the fence regulations.
Yes. Okay. So you want us to withdraw Resolution 05-10-2302, which is for conditional use permit for a 7-foot tall fence.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, and then as per Abby, we would add that condition to your other CUP that, because you have to conform to the fencing requirements of the city, and you just got to be on the lot and that kind of stuff.
So Chair, if I might just say that it would then just be a motion to move to adopt PC Resolution 5-10-23-01, approving blah, 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 with an additional condition that any fencing shall conform to the zoning code.
And do we need to move to deny the second resolution?
Not if, I mean, you certainly could. Otherwise, I would just say that his notation on the record of the withdrawal is enough for us to say there is no need for that second resolution
We'll just
anymore.
need one vote?
That is correct.
Okay. Commissioners?
No,
Concerns?
I will, if I may.
Yes.
I mean, when this came up last week, it seemed like the neighborhood didn't have notification time on any of this, and that's why I agreed and voted to table it. And I think time has gone by, and they're really taking action. But from what I'm hearing tonight, whether they go direction A or direction B, it still needs a conditional use permit to go through the floodway overlay. That said, if we pass that tonight, it doesn't change anything from what I'm understanding. It doesn't hurry up the process. If we were to table this, it doesn't delay nothing changes if we pass this, other than the fact that pass it now rather than 2 weeks from now. I mean, we have no say in this, in their dispute with FERC or what they're bringing up with FERC. It's just the floodway, the pipeline through the floodway. That's just my own thought on it. And I know Northern is open to listening to FERC's opinion when they present it to FERC, and FERC comes back, and all that'll go on, and which needs to go on. But for us, in my opinion, Gordon, push this.
Other comments?
My only concern is by approving that portion of it, then does that kind of surmise that we've approved it for that particular location as well? Because the location is identified in this resolution, isn't it?
This resolution does say it needs to be in substantial conformance to the plans that were submitted. So if the pipe changed maybe a degree or went a little further north or further south, as long as it was still on the subject property, staff would look at that and say that that's substantially conforming with the use permit.
Okay, so then the residents that are concerned about the location would not be able to, like, it would be a done deal as far as they're concerned with the location. Am I understanding this right? Because it is a location-specific approval?
Well,
No, what we're approving is where the pipe is going in the
through the
floodplain.
pond.
We are not approving where it starts up at this other end. We are only approving that it can go through the floodplain.
Okay.
If it gets moved or to another property or something, that's not part of us. That's kind of where the rub is, right? We're sitting with very little ability except for where this pipe's, if we're gonna allow the pipe, and there's not likely any reason to deny it.
Just to add on there, just for reference, Commissioner Kubal, commissioners and counselors, our only authority, and I don't believe the floodplain is determined on here, forgive me for not knowing exactly the boundary, but it's really from about here to about here. That's what we're approving. So if the pipe went, up slightly and down, and it still stayed on the subject property, or if it shifted slightly down and came out here, something like that, all of that staff would still say is still in substantial conformance with our approvals.
And the site itself, is that kind of like red X?
Nope, the site, so this is the subject properties. Residence property lines are not on here, but if you give me just a second, I can
Overlay it.
hear them in Anoka County for a different reason later. Takes me a minute, and I know I'm not in the right area. Close. So that's the subject property. So as long as let's just say the FERC challenge or whatever it may be had realigned the pipe through the pond, and that pipe through the pond ends up, coming slightly south, then, and maybe other pursuances to the pipe end up here. It's not about what ends up here. It's about just what goes through that pipe on the pond on both of these two properties. That makes sense, Commissioner Kubal? Okay.
Here, one of the challenges here is that landowners do have rights to do things on their property. And if somebody else in the neighborhood decided to put a backyard slaughterhouse for, commercial.
For the record, Commissioner Young, I'm not sure those would be allowed. I just want to.
Okay, well, I mean, there's
something that's
I'm
allowed.
thinking about a radio tower or lots of other things that a neighbor may not like. actually on ag.
It might be, yeah.
Yeah. They don't have to notify the neighbors that they're going to use their property in one way or another. And I understand concerns, and you didn't realize that that a neighbor was going to use their property one way or another. And I do understand that, but there are underlying property rights on ways to use or lease or subdivide property. And I grant that is challenging. I truly do.
Yes, Sam.
Ready for a motion? I will move to adopt PC Resolution 05102301, approving the conditional use permit for construction of a natural gas pipeline in the flood overlay district, subject to the findings and conditions proposed by staff. Condition that the fencing conform to our current code.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I would second that, Chairman.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
More concerned about potential legal action, so I'm just going to abstain on this one.
So the motion passes with 5 yeses and 1 abstention. What this means is that the Planning Commission is, for lack of a better term, the final stop for a CUP. So it's now granted. However, if you disagree with the decision we made, you have 1 week to, and Abby's got her card here, to make an appeal. I don't know what the cost of that is on a CUP, but there is a charge that goes with it. And then once that appeal is made, it will go to the city council, and they will either affirm or change our decision.
My card is available on the table for anybody that doesn't already have it. I'm happy to answer any questions. The only thing I would say is tomorrow's a very heavy meeting day. Email me if you want to start that process, and we can start communicating on what would be needed.
I want to thank you all for coming this evening. I know this is a tough issue. We wish you all the best. Thank you. We'll move to item 7, discussion. Do we have Councilperson Roberts?
We do not this evening.
So then we'll move to Abby.
And if you can just give me a quick second, I wanted to share with the commission. The city staff has been in discussions with the cities of Columbus, Hugo, and Lino Lakes about a potential development that may occur in Lino Lakes and Hugo. And just for reference, and I don't know if I have the exact streets right, but would run approximately at 165th Street North to the city's boundary of 180th Street North. I think it actually might extend just further north than the city's boundary, but exactly where, I'm not sure. There's a single landowner in this area that is in discussions with a developer. They have been moving forward with concept planning for large warehousing office complex. As part of this, Columbus, Hugo, Lino Lakes is starting and the city of Forest Lake is starting discussions now. Also, we'll be meeting with the Met Council and MnDOT, both of the counties, in just regards to transportation, utility, infrastructure improvements that are going to be needed in this area to help support the development within Columbus and Lino Lakes, in between the interstate and the county line. I think that this is a project that probably wouldn't see full build out for at least maybe a full decade, but I could imagine that groundbreaking could occur within the next couple of years if all of the, processes, procedures, permitting and that sort of stuff goes through. As part of those discussions, we will be talking collectively about the potential for additional interstate accesses in this point. But I did want to just remind the commission that this is our western and our southern boundary. 180th is our southern boundary. So we, as part of discussions, are keeping at the forefront and what kind of improvements might be needed to the local system in this area if this ended up going through, and what that could mean for the potential spurring of the development at our southwest corner, where we might not have seen that for some time. I'll keep all of you posted as we continue those conversations, but I wanted to at least just let you know the commission might be seeing some things later this year, even with regard to comment periods and those sorts of things on future area projects.
Abby, it's not coming into Forest Lake.
It is not coming into Forest Lake. It would be in Columbus and Hugo, but it would be located on our western property boundary. This is Elmcrest. Elmcrest leads up to Hornsby in Columbus and Highway 97. So there could be some local impacts there that we will need to probably consider.
That's where that big engineered wetland is.
It's a little further to the north.
Okay.
I'll pull up our GIS just really quick. Second. You won't be able to see the entire wetland area that you're referencing there,
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Big engineered wetland that was put in there, I think with Rice Creek money.
Rice Creek Watershed District did do a large wetland banking project right on our western property boundary. That is north of the development, if I remember right, that this development kind of comes out maybe about here. So it's probably spanning about this area. It doesn't quite go above the split. I think it's still below. I don't know which way you call the split, but where there's two instead of one.
We all call it the split.
But what's above and below? Yeah. So I think you all know what I mean. I just wanted to at least just give the commission the heads up on this, that we're starting to talk about just sub-area regional planning, and that some of you, if stuff starts to come forward, might think, why are we talking about this area? We weren't going to see development down there till 2040, 2050. It could come sooner than that. So that is really the only big update I have. Aside from that, we are filtering a number of smaller developments similar to Shadow Creek, a lot of little things that are still lingering from previous years. But our permit season has picked up. Construction is rebounding. We are lots of zoning inquiries, lots of fences, lots of decks, lots of little things that we're reviewing that's taking up quite a bit of our time. And then lastly, I know, Chair, you had said trying to schedule a time where we might be able to have a little bit of a social hour that has to meet Dawn, our new admin. I haven't forgotten that. I just haven't quite scheduled that yet. So just know that we'll try to arrange something for this probably summer, that we might be able to all get together, maybe even a more social way, maybe not on a commission night, who knows?
A meeting in 2 weeks?
We do have a meeting in 2 weeks. I do believe that Shadow Creek will be back for you. I hope that we will be there with that development. We also will have wetland banking coming back towards you, to you. That was something that we, at the discussion with this commission, we tabled it, you tabled it, because you wanted staff to continue to work with our partners, the community. Since last meeting, we have met with both watershed districts, Bowser and the Conservation District. So I think something will be coming back before you on the 22nd.
24th.
Nice try.
The 22nd is a council meeting, so I get those dates mixed up sometimes.
You're elevating us quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to come back on another night than the 24th.
Any questions, Abby?
Just wondering, I'm assuming that the letter from Comfort Lake Watershed District was part of the discussions with Bowser at all.
Yeah, so that was entered into the record. I did also, I think I advised the city council on it. If not, I definitely will on Monday, just of our delayed timeline. It doesn't set us back significantly in any way. Rice Creek Watershed District's board president, maybe, John Waller did come to the city council meeting on Monday and did express support for the city's ordinance. So it is an interesting climate that we're in when we do have some watersheds maybe not being in support of our ordinance and others being in support. We're trying to balance that. All that will come back before you in, something in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Chair, I'll have a letter.
Okay.
I'll have a letter for that.
You need anything for us?
Yes. Well, first of all, Abby, good job on doing it all by yourself. You've managed it very well.
I've done this before, just not here, so it's been a while. Thank you.
And I would also compliment Chair Gerard on managing what could be a tenacious kind of a meeting. I don't think anybody walked out of here completely angry, and when I see what's going on out there right now, I feel like some progress is happening with, they're at least talking out there. So you managed a very well meeting. Good job.
Thank you.
Nothing for me.
Susan?
Nope.
Jeff?
Just like to mention that's part of the EDA packet I sent down to you. It had the map, and we were talking a little bit about discussions as far as parcels and things like that. In that pamphlet, if you want to take a look at it, I don't have it to give to everybody, but if you care to look at it, it shows how they plan on breaking this area down.
How we
need be
could.
Into that, yes.
How we
It's an
could break it.
option.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as different parcels and things like that. Just, I know you had questions about opportunity for an option for a store or whatever. I think they're not opposed to maybe having that as an option.
I certainly can send that out to all the commission members as well.
And, I know that the EDA is wanting some sort of significant place and businesses there that would be a fairly high dollar jobs location. And that is not the kinds of things that are the support services for residential buildings. And we've talked about it before, dwelling units consume about 1.5 times the amount of property tax requirements that they contribute to the city's operating budget. And so it is important that we have more commercial developments. I get a lot of letters here with folks saying there aren't any services really on the eastern side of the city. I grant that there are methods of transportation, but one of the things that we've talked about is trying to design areas that are more walkable, that are bikeable. And if we're doing that, then we have to have the complete package.
I understand. I don't think they're focused on, it has to be a large employer impacted area. Like this, I forget what the term they were trying to use for that, those.
Kind of an anchor sometimes.
Well, their draw, what type of business was that? He was asking what
A data
thing.
center.
So something like that, maybe only employ maybe 8 people. maintain that. So that's not a large employer type thing versus if you had something like your Amazon substation or a UPS focal point or something like that.
I think the thought is that this data center spawns other businesses to be right there with whatever.
Yeah.
Data centers need clean energy. You know, they need the security. And if you are close to one, then you are also guaranteed clean energy, you know, without the spikes that the rest of us have.
All right.
Chair Gerard, may I just, one more thing, just for all commissioners. Commissioner Young had said that she gets letters. Recently, we did make some changes to the city's website. Now that you all have city email, when somebody goes to click on the email me link next to your name on our website, it no longer goes to city staff. It actually will go to your city email. I don't know if you'll get anything. Maybe just by saying that on the record, you'll get tons of stuff. Keep us posted if it becomes a nuisance or a problem, or you need our assistance, or if there's something that should be entered into the record, we'd be happy to. But until now, it's all been kind of going into our generic zoning email, and we thought it was most appropriate that when somebody's trying to contact a commissioner, they had that right to just do so with the city's email system.
I have no comment, so the chair is looking for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn, Commissioner.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you all.